Sophia Reynolds stood outside the towering granite facade of the Jefferson County Courthouse, her breath fogging in the crisp autumn air of Washington, D.C. The morning sun glinted off the building's windows, casting sharp reflections onto the pavement below. At 38, with a decade as a federal prosecutor under her belt, she'd seen her share of high-stakes cases. But today was different. Today, she wasn't just fighting for justice. She was fighting a ghost from her past, one she'd buried deep beneath years of legal victories. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, her navy blazer crisp against the chill. In her hands, she clutched a leather briefcase stuffed with files, months of evidence, wiretaps, and financial records that could topple a corrupt empire. The defendant, Robert Langston, was a real estate tycoon whose skyscrapers dominated the D.C. skyline. He was accused of siphoning millions in public funds meant for affordable housing into his private accounts. It wasn't just a crime. It was a betrayal of every struggling family Sophia had grown up alongside in Southeast D.C. She adjusted her scarf, her fingers brushing against a small silver pendant, a gift from her late mother, who died waiting for a subsidized apartment that never came. That loss had fueled Sophia's career, a quiet fire that burned hotter with every case she took on. Langston wasn't just another white-collar criminal to her. He was a symbol of the system that had failed her family. And today, she'd make sure he paid. But there was a bigger obstacle than Langston: Judge Malcolm Grayson. Known in legal circles as the Gavel, Grayson was a legend and a nightmare. At 62, with silver hair and a perpetual scowl, he ruled his courtroom like a king, his rulings as unpredictable as they were final. Lawyers whispered about his sharp tongue, his disdain for overzealous prosecutors, and rumors of backroom deals that kept the powerful untouchable. Sophia had never faced him before, but she'd heard the stories. Today she'd find out if they were true. The courthouse doors loomed ahead, flanked by stone lions weathered by decades of D.C. winters. Sophia took a deep breath, steeling herself. She wasn't just walking into a trial. She was walking into a battlefield. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a memory flickered. A courtroom from 20 years ago, a judge's gavel slamming down, and her mother's tear-streaked face as their eviction case was dismissed. That day had planted a seed, and today it would bloom. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the usual chaos: lawyers barking into phones, clerks shuffling papers, reporters hovering like vultures. Sophia navigated the crowd, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She rode the elevator to the 5th floor, where courtroom 5C awaited, a grand space with oak-paneled walls and a raised bench that gave Grayson an almost godlike perch. The gallery was packed: journalists, political aides, even a few curious law students. This wasn't just a trial, it was a spectacle. Sophia pushed through the double doors, her heart thudding. The air smelled of polished wood and tension. She set her briefcase on the prosecution table, glancing at the defense side where Langston sat, his tailored suit pristine, his smirk unshakable. Beside him, his attorney, Victor Hayes, a shark in a three-piece suit, shuffled notes with practiced calm. They thought they'd already won. Then the bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Malcolm Grayson." The room stood as one. Grayson swept in, his black robe billowing like a storm cloud. He climbed the bench, his eyes scanning the room with cold precision before settling on Sophia. For a split second their gazes locked, his icy blue, hers a steady brown. She felt the weight of his stare, a silent challenge. He sat, the gavel cracked once, and the trial began. The opening salvo, Grayson didn't waste time. As Sophia rose to deliver her opening statement, he leaned back in his chair, flipping through a file with exaggerated disinterest. She cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the hum of the courtroom. "Good morning, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Today, we're here to uncover a betrayal of trust. Robert Langston, a man entrusted with public funds to build homes for the vulnerable, instead built a fortune for himself. The evidence will show. Miss Reynolds, Grayson interrupted, his voice a low growl. I assume you've got something more than noble platitudes to offer today, or are we just wasting oxygen? A ripple of laughter came from the defense table. Langston's smirk widened. Sophia's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. She'd faced worse, drunk cops at crime scenes, weeping victims, even a defendant who'd spat at her in open court. Grayson wouldn't rattle her. Your Honor, she said evenly, the evidence will speak louder than any platitude. We have financial records, wiretaps, and witnesses that prove Mr. Langston diverted over $12 million in housing grants. Grayson waved a hand, cutting her off again. Taxpayer money? Spare me the melodrama. Every case in this building involves taxpayer money. Get to the point. The gallery shifted, a few reporters scribbling furiously. Sophia's jaw tightened, but she pressed on. The point, Your Honor, is felony corruption. Charges that carry serious weight. Grayson smirked, leaning forward. Serious weight? I've seen jaywalking tickets with more substance. Move along, Miss Reynolds. The condescension stung, but Sophia didn't flinch. She'd dealt with men like him her whole life, men who thought they could bully her into silence. She glanced at the jury. 12 faces, some curious, some skeptical. They were her real audience. Grayson could posture all he wanted. She'd win them over with facts. The evidence mounts. For the next hour, Sophia laid out her case. She presented bank statements showing suspicious transfers from public accounts to Langston's shell companies. She played a wiretap of Langston laughing with an aide about screwing the little guy. The jury leaned forward, their expressions hardening. Even Hayes, the defense attorney, shifted uncomfortably. But Grayson wasn't having it. He interrupted constantly, dismissing key exhibits with flippant remarks. Creative accounting isn't a crime, Miss Reynolds, he said when she showed a $3 million discrepancy. This wiretap proves nothing but bravado, he snapped, waving away Langston's recorded confession. Sophia stayed calm, her voice steady. She'd expected resistance, but this was different. Grayson wasn't just skeptical, he was hostile. Every ruling tilted toward the defense, every objection from Hayes sustained without debate. The jury noticed, their brows furrowed, their glances darted between her and the bench. Then came the moment that changed everything. The crack in the armor. Sophia pulled a thick folder from her briefcase. Exhibit 17, a set of authorization forms buried deep in the housing grant records. She'd spent weeks tracking them down, cross-referencing signatures with a forensic accountant. Now, she held them up. Your Honor, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit 17. These documents show approvals for fund transfers that bypass standard oversight. They bear a signature. Grayson cut in, his tone sharp. Signatures? Are we playing handwriting detective now? This is a courtroom, not a kindergarten class. A few chuckles broke the tension, but Sophia didn't smile. She placed the folder on the table, her movements deliberate. The signature belongs to someone with judicial authority, someone who approved these transactions personally. The room stilled. Grayson's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat. Sophia caught it, a flicker of something beneath his arrogance. Fear? Guilt? She pressed forward. Your Honor, would you care to explain why your signature appears on these documents? A gasp swept the gallery. The jury sat up straighter. Hayes shot to his feet, stammering, Objection, this is irrelevant. Overruled, Grayson barked, but his voice was tighter now, less certain. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the bench. Miss Reynolds, you're treading on dangerous ground. Accusations like that require proof. Sophia met his gaze, unflinching. I have proof, Your Honor. These forms were filed under your oversight in 2019, during your tenure as a district overseer for housing grants. They tie you directly to Langston's scheme. The courtroom erupted, murmurs, gasps, the scratch of pens on notebooks. Grayson's face darkened, a vein pulsing in his temple. This is inadmissible, he snapped. I won't allow fabricated nonsense in my court. Sophia didn't back down. It's not fabricated. It's verified by 2 independent accountants and stamped with your judicial seal. The media's here, Your Honor. The jury's listening. You can't bury this." For the first time, Grayson hesitated. His eyes darted to the gallery, then back to her. She saw it then, the panic. He wasn't just protecting Langston. He was protecting himself. The motive revealed. Later that day, during a recess, Sophia sat in a cramped witness room, sipping stale coffee. Her co-counsel, a wiry young attorney named Daniel Kim, burst in, his face flushed. "You were right," he said, tossing a file onto the table. "Grayson's got a stake in this. We dug into his financials, offshore accounts, shell companies. He's been taking kickbacks from Langston for years." Sophia's stomach twisted. She'd suspected it, but seeing it confirmed hit differently. "Why risk it?" she asked. "He's a judge. He didn't need the money." Daniel shrugged. "Greed? Power?" Langston's projects funded Grayson's vacation homes, his wife's jewelry. He got sloppy, though, left his signature on those forms. Sophia stared at the file, her mind racing. This wasn't just about Langston anymore. Grayson had built a career on intimidating others, but he'd underestimated her. And now she had him cornered. The final blowback in the courtroom, Sophia played her trump card. She called a surprise witness, a former clerk named Elena Ortiz, who'd worked under Grayson in 2019. Elena, a petite woman with nervous hands, took the stand. "Miss Ortiz," Sophia began, "did Judge Grayson ever instruct you to process documents without proper review?" Elena nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, he told me to approve anything from Langston's office. Said it was pre-cleared. I didn't question it. He was the boss." The jury's eyes widened. Hayes objected, but Grayson overruled him, his voice shaky. He was unraveling. Sophia turned to the bench. "Your Honor, I have one more exhibit, a wiretap from last month. It's you, speaking to Langston about covering this up." She nodded to Daniel, who played the tape. Grayson's voice crackled through the speakers. "If this gets out, we're done. Keep your mouth shut, and I'll handle the prosecutor." The room froze. Grayson's face went white, his hands trembling. He slammed the gavel. "This hearing is over." Sophia stepped forward. "Not yet, Your Honor." She glanced at the back of the room, where 2 U.S. Marshals stood ready. She'd tipped them off during the recess, armed with Daniel's findings. The Marshals approached the bench. "Malcolm Grayson, you're under arrest for conspiracy and corruption." The gavel slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. The sound echoed, a death knell to his career. Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, and the gallery exploded. Shouts, camera flashes, chaos. Sophia watched him go, her chest tight. "This isn't revenge," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "It's justice." Langston slumped in his chair, his defiance gone. "I'll talk," he muttered. "Just get me a deal." She nodded. "Start now." The Jefferson County Courthouse buzzed for weeks after Grayson's arrest. Headlines screamed, "Corrupt judge handcuffed in own courtroom." Reporters camped outside Sophia's office, clamoring for interviews. She declined them all, preferring the quiet of her apartment, where she sat with a glass of wine, staring at her mother's pendant. She'd won, but the victory felt bittersweet. Grayson's downfall wouldn't bring her mother back or erase the years of struggle. Still, it meant something. It meant the system could bend toward justice, even if just for a moment. Grayson faced trial 6 months later, pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. 10 years instead of 20. Langston took a deal too, spilling names that triggered a dozen more investigations. The housing grants were reallocated, and a new oversight board was formed. Small wins, but wins nonetheless. Sophia kept working, taking on cases others deemed impossible. She'd become a symbol, a prosecutor who'd stared down a titan and won. Law students wrote papers about her. Activists chanted her name at rallies. She didn't care for the fame. She cared about the next fight. One evening, as she walked home through D.C.'s streets, she passed a construction site, a new affordable housing complex funded by the recovered grants. A worker waved at her, grinning. "Heard you made this happen, ma'am? Thank you." She smiled, the pendant warm against her skin. Just doing my job. Back in her apartment, she flipped on the news. A pundit was dissecting Grayson's fall, a reminder that no one's above the law. Sophia turned it off, leaning back in her chair. The city hummed outside, alive with possibility. She raised her glass to the empty room. "To you, Mom," she whispered. "We got one." The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for tonight, she'd rest. Tomorrow, there'd be another case, another battle, and Sophia Reynolds would be ready.